One of the first stories that illustrates the kind of man that Bill Gates was is that he loved playing cards with his grandma as a kid. One of the opening stories in the book says, before everything, there was a pack of cards and a single goal: beat my grandmother. In my family, there was no faster way to win favor than to be good at games, especially card games. If you were confident in rummy or bridge or canasta, you had our respect, which made my maternal grandmother a household legend. In the coming years, we would play thousands of hands of cards. We played for fun, we played to tease each other and pass the time, but my grandmother also played to win, and she always did. And this sparks this desire in Bill Gates as a little 8 to 13-year-old. I have to figure out how to beat my grandma at playing cards, any sort of game. His grandma wasn't just good at one game, she was good at everything. And it didn't matter who she played with or how she played with them. Gates started to realize, man, my grandma has this sense for how card games work. He says, I see for the first time that for all the mystery and luck in a game of cards, there are things that I can learn to increase my chances of winning. And I realize Grandma isn't just lucky or talented. She's trained her brain, and I can too. Learning how to play cards is the first of many examples in his life of this work feedback loop of try a thing, see if it works, fix the things that are broken, and just go through that same loop of try, break it, fix it, try, break it, fix it, iterate, iterate, iterate. Card games were the first place he was able to unleash all of that. Every time he would sit down with his grandma from this time going forward to play cards, he would watch. He'd try to figure out how could he improve? What are the strategies? What are the tactics? His grandma never fed him the answers. He learned through experience, and eventually he did get better than her. But I love how he describes the feeling of finally getting better than grandma. He says, I don't even remember what game we were playing the first time I won more games in a day than she did. But I do know my grandmother was pleased. Okay, so I love this because Gates was not so infatuated with winning that he's like, I remember it was this one game of rummy on April 13th when I was 8 years old that I finally won. Like, no, it wasn't like that. He was obsessed with the process of growing. He was obsessed with the grind, not just with the win. This isn't like somebody who's like, I remember the exact day I won the Super Bowl. I remember the exact day I sold my business for exactly this many dollars. He doesn't even remember when he hit that tipping point of getting better than grandma. He just knows that it happened. What he did with card playing is how the rest of his business journey plays out. Find something, apply himself completely to it, use his mind to break it down and figure out the problem, and eventually realize, wow, I've solved this. That feels really, really satisfying. This book that I just read, Source Code, is about Bill Gates from age 8 is when it opens up until he moves to Seattle, and drops out of college to work on Microsoft full time. And it provides such a cool, raw, unfiltered look at who Bill Gates is. I love working with kids. I've been teaching kids at my local church, at summer camps, in the community whenever I can, because kids are raw. They're not cool yet. If they feel sad, they'll cry and bawl on the floor. If they feel excited, they're going to jump around and get super hyped with you. You can talk about whatever you want with the kids, and they'll be totally transparent with you. And this is a book that Bill Gates wrote about his childhood. And you can see straight to the core of what made Bill Gates him. He was an extremely hyperactive child. He always had excess energy. He had so much going on in his head that in order to really focus, he had to do some sort of physical moving around so that he could actually get his mental ducks in a row. He talks about how as a kid, he would always be rocking back and forth on a rocking horse or whatever he could to move around. There are key points in this book where he gets in his own head and thinks while he's on a long walk and makes pivotal decisions about the founding of the company as he's moving. I did this as a kid on the trampoline in our backyard in between classes or projects I was working on. I would run out, get on the trampoline, jump around for 5 or 10 minutes, come back inside. Moving makes hyperactive brains focus on something. So Gates is hyperactive, super high energy, so high energy, that he almost has to move to calm himself down enough to harness his brain. He has an extreme intensity about him. And there's this great quote where he says, "I channeled the same intensity that drew me into solving the puzzle of grandma's card skill into anything that interested me, but nothing that didn't." This kid has extreme energy, extreme drive, and very selective desire for where he's going to point it. Things like reading, math, thinking in his own head, that stuff, he would rapid fire down the rabbit hole. But things like life, school, his family, he totally didn't care about Bill Gates. He was a very interesting kid, but he also had an extremely supportive and loving family. The way he was able to start funneling a lot of that hyperactivity into good opportunities and good learning is because of his family. He has this great line where he says, "My parents struggle with their hyperkinetic, brainy, often contrarian, tempestuous son would absorb much of their energy as I grew up and would indelibly shape our family. As I've grown older, I better understand just how instrumental they were in helping chart my unconventional path to adulthood." This was a remarkable person with a remarkable support structure around him. His grandma and mom were always reading to him. Gates was a voracious reader. He has this great line in the book where he says, "When the library opened, the year before I was born, a line of kids snaked out the door to the street. It'd become a clubhouse for all my neighborhood. And for me, all throughout my youth and for a long time, it was my favorite place in the world." He also said that books were the one thing his parents never questioned spending money on. They would buy any book, anytime. He read the entire volume of an encyclopedia at age 9, A to Z, just straight through. When the new version of the book would get there every Christmas, he would consume it. He was so excited about it every year. And with reading, he described reading like this. He said, "Through reading, I could find answers to all sorts of things, and one answer raises even more questions. The deeper you dig, the more you want to know." Gates, as a kid, was consumed with learning for learning's sake. He wasn't there to get some result. He just loved the process of thinking and learning, which meant he did not love school. He loved learning, but school was tough. It felt slow. He says, "By early elementary school, I was reading a lot on my own at home. I was learning how to learn by myself. I liked the feeling of being able to quickly absorb new facts and entertain myself with chapter books. School, however, felt slow. And no duh, it felt slow to him. This guy was so hyperactive, he had to move around to harness his brain. When you have to sit still in a classroom, your brain's just going to wander." He did say that when something did catch my attention, I might leap up from my seat, frantically raise my hand, or shout out an answer. This kid had so much intensity that when school lost him, he was off somewhere else thinking. But as soon as he got back, he heard something interesting at school, he was all there. There's this fantastic line that describes him so well. He says, "I wasn't trying to be disruptive. My mind simply shifted easily into a state of unrestrained exuberance." The kid wasn't trying to be a bad student. He just got super excited about things really easily. And when something wasn't worth getting excited about, he didn't get excited about it. A lot of this stuff is super cool, but it can be hard to process in terms of a normal social mold. And so what that meant was his mom had a lot of questions and struggles with, how do I raise this boy? I'm not going to talk too much about his mom, but she was an exceptional woman. She was an extremely high performer, super social, super outgoing, super high achieving, had huge dreams for her family, did a ton of things in business and nonprofits in an era where women were generally not in any roles like this. And so this super high achieving social woman who wants to raise an amazing family and amazing children sees her son who lives in his own head, who's super intense. She really wants him to be more social. She really wants to make him a well-rounded person, as a lot of parents would say. But a lot of it was off base with how Gates's mind works. When he describes the efforts his mom made to correct him or help him interact with people better, he said that it's not like he was actively resisting his mother's parenting. It's just that none of it really registered. It might snap him out of his own world for a second, but then he'd go right back to what he was thinking about. And that was kind of a tension point between him and his mom. Like, you need to change and be more social or be more this. And he was like, I'm trying. But then his brain would just switch back. He didn't really understand how good his mom was at social relationships at the time. But later in the book, he says, I can see now that mom was a student of relationships, genuinely interested in matching people's abilities with roles and always knowing exactly who to call if you asked. But back then, it was a talent that was lost on me. It seemed unimportant and kind of superficial. But still, you can see that this was a remarkable kid with tons of energy, with a mother and a family who just helped him grow, helped him funnel that into the right things, which we'll see more a little later down the line. This kid constantly questioned rules. He just wanted to do stuff. He just wanted to learn. He just wanted to be effective. There's this fantastic story about in school, his teacher had 2 grading scales. She had a letter grading system of A, B, C for how good your assignment was, and a number grading scale, 1, 2, 3, for how much effort you put in. 1 was the most effort, 3 was the least effort. And the ideal grade was an A1, excellent quality, maximum effort. Gates looked at this and was like, this is stupid. If you're smart, you should be able to get an A with minimum effort. That should be the best grade. So he tells his teacher this, and she thinks he's joking. From then on, he actually goes up to his teacher and is like, please give me an A3. Give me the best quality, worst effort grade. She thought I was showboating, he said, which he totally was. But the combination of high grade, low effort made the most sense to him. Here's a great quote. He says, I was very deliberate about what I put energy into and what I let slide. I continued to excel in math and reading and made almost no effort in the subjects I dismissed as uninteresting. You can see the massive capacity, the massive potential of this kid, just waiting to find the thing that he can put all his energy behind. He would funnel his intensity into one thing as he would kind of disregard rules and just want to be effective. He realized at like age 9 that the gap between him and adults was not very big. As he figured out how to read, how to learn for himself, how to ask really good questions, he felt like, why should I listen to a lot of adults? There's this series of lines where he talks about this in the book. At that age, like 9 years old, kids expect their parents and teachers to have all the answers. Increasingly, I felt that they didn't, or at least they couldn't provide answers that satisfied me. My perception of adults' limitations undermined the family compact. If I could think for myself, I reasoned, why would I need my parents' input? As a 9-year-old, this guy is going, I can learn things that adults aren't. I can ask questions that they give me the wrong answer to. So unless they can tell me something that is correct, why should I listen to them? Which is totally not how most families work. But this kid was wired for effectiveness and accuracy. It's baked into him. You don't teach this to someone as a 9-year-old. This is a phenomenal story about his ridiculous level of intensity and drive when he took to something. This foreshadows a lot about who he would become in school. There's this school project where they have to do a research assignment on a U.S. state. All his classmates are picking California, Florida, and Hawaii, the cool states. When it's his turn to pick, he said that I decided to pick Delaware for 2 reasons. It was a contrarian choice. I was sure no one else wanted it. And my dad said it was friendly to business. So he picks, I'm going to research Delaware. And then he throws himself at this project. He reads everything he can find. He reads every book he can find on it. He writes to the state of Delaware, to the tourism board. He goes through all these like religious works that like mention Delaware because his grandma was a Christian Scientist. He actually would write to Delaware companies like DuPont and like learn about their management structure and the products and the overseas operations. He literally goes down the rabbit hole of how was nylon invented, like this compound that's used in manufacturing, and how it works in a company in Delaware. He wrote up an obituary of a board member who was at a Delaware company. This kid wrote 177 pages on the state of Delaware as a 9-year-old. 177 pages. It was such a big report. He had this phenomenal line in the book. He says, looking back at that report, I can see hints of the adult I would become, my intellectual interests starting to take root. Each bit of knowledge I accrued added to a sense of empowerment, the feeling that by applying my brain, I could solve even the world's most complex mysteries. You can see that his deepest joy comes from throwing himself at a problem and just figuring it out. The school handed out to all their students a form that was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It had a few different boxes like cowboy, fireman, or astronaut. Bill Gates looks at the list and he checks the astronaut box, but then writes in what he really sees himself as. He says, I saw myself as a scientist. I wanted to be one of those people who spends his days trying to understand things that other people do not. His deepest craving was not a cool profession. It was not some sort of fancy title. As a kid, the deepest desire of his heart was to learn things that are hard to learn, to conquer problems. Okay, to jump back to the relationship with his family was struggling so much with this kid who was really in his own head, who was super hyperactive but couldn't focus on any one thing, doesn't really fit into a normal box. They went to therapy. They took this kid to a therapist. And Bill Gates, this section is so interesting. He talks about how he was skeptical at first, but the therapist just asked questions. It sounds like what a pure coach does. They just listen and then ask questions and listen and ask questions. He would guide Bill Gates without giving him the answers, help him find his own conclusions. This therapist helped him realize that his parents did love him and he wouldn't be under their roof forever. They were his allies in terms of his long-term life goals, in terms of what really counted, and they hadn't done anything wrong. So the conclusion from all this therapy was that instead of fighting my traditional parents who had all these goals for me, I should focus my energy on gaining the skills I would need out in the world. There's a great quote where he says, my father later shared what the doctor said. Give it up, he told my parents. He's going to win. Ease up. Don't force it. Give your son more freedom. And this is really hard for the Gates' family because they really want their kids to succeed. They really want their kids to fit into a certain box, and they're having to break down their mental model of this is what we want our son to grow up as. This is how we're going to parent you. It hurts a lot. We have to give our 9-year-old more independence. We have to help him develop and love him and give him structure, but give him the freedom to read and run the way that he's wired for. And his parents respond so admirably. Sure, his mom and dad have little moments that all mom and dads have with their kids, but they take this advice and figure out how do we give our kid more independence, which we'll see down the line with stories about him crawling out his window at night to do extra coding and his parents letting him do it. Now we're getting to middle school years, and around 7th grade, he goes to this private school called Lakeside School. This is the point in the story that a lot of people talk about. They say Lakeside School is this big private school that happened to have a fancy computer. And this is when he started to learn about computers at a certain time. All true. A lot of other interesting stuff happens at this school as well that I want to highlight. When he shows up, he feels really out of place. He doesn't know any of the kids there. All the kids are from rich families in the area. He's not sure how to break into the social circles. Normal middle school drama inside a 13-year-old boy, right? But one thing he experiments with is trying to be the class clown because he doesn't want to be known as the nerd. He's never going to be an athlete. And that totally backfires. He realizes, man, if I position myself as the class clown, the teachers see me as below average and I have no status or respect from anyone. So he keeps trying to figure out, who am I going to be? What am I going to do? And he finds this guy at the school. His name was Kent. And Kent was kind of an outsider. He had a cleft lip, walked a little funny. But Gates noticed his intense passion. This kid was extremely passionate about politics. He knew more about politics than any of the teachers at the school at age 13. Gates said he was drawn to Kent because the intensity intrigued him. If he liked something, Kent went all in. As the author of a 177-page disquisition on the state of Delaware, I could appreciate this. Like, intensity finds intensity. Driven people find driven people. They became best friends after they went on a camping trip at the beach and the tide came in and flooded their tent. And after that, they were just like, we're bros now. And he said, I still remember Kent's phone number to this day. He would have conversations at night with him over the phone. He talks about how Kent shaped him because as a kid, he wanted to win every game he played, but he never had an aim beyond victory. It was raw intelligence. It was information for information's sake. Kent had ambition and goals. Kent helped spark Gates' raw knowledge and channel it into some sort of goal. So around this time, the school decides to get a way to dial into a nearby computer. Literally, you use a phone to contact a computer not at the school so that the people at the school could work on the computer. This was a crazy thing. Very few places in the world had something like this. And basically on a hunch, the school just bet, hey, we'll throw one of these in there and see if it's a good thing. Crazy combination of circumstances. Gates said that all these years later, it amazes me still how many disparate things had to come together for me to be able to use a computer in 1968. So this computer terminal goes in that lets you dial into a nearby computer, and Bill Gates starts messing around with it, and he loves it. A big reason was that coding, as he says, was a social leveler. Age didn't matter if you could write good programs and figure out cool problems. This kid was in 8th grade, and there were juniors and seniors in there. And the school let the room be pretty free roaming. There weren't a ton of rules. If you were in there, you could just mess with the computer, which meant that all the kids kind of took over and made it their own little kingdom. Everybody was in there writing programs and trying again and trying again. They built their own little hierarchy of which kids were better and which kids were worse. Our grades suffered, our parents worried, but we learned and learned quickly. It was the most fun I'd ever had at school. The unstructured learning in a room with other kids doing a thing where age didn't matter, status didn't matter, it was just you and the code. That unstructured learning was way cooler to Bill Gates than school. He was wired for real world learning without the guardrails and the structure of school, not the classroom environment or artificial whatever. The computer situation is really cool, but that only lasted a few months. The school got rid of the terminal after a little while because it was expensive to run. Gates kept getting computer time not because of luck and opportunity, but because he started to find other ways to make opportunity. He, by complete happenstance, became friends with the woman who drove his carpool. As he talked to her about computing, she got the idea to connect them to a nearby computer company to mess around with some of their early computer programs. And the company said, sure, we'll let you kids come in and test our stuff before we send it out to other customers so that the problems happen with the teenagers. They were testing and messing around with programs, and they didn't get paid for it. They just didn't get charged money to use the computer. In his head, that was a screaming deal. He was exchanging his time for the opportunity to learn. As he and the boys were tinkering on this computer at C-Cubed, the company they were programming for, he knew that time was limited. He'd already lost his opportunity to program on the computer back at his middle school. And now he has another opportunity to work on a computer nearby. He's sure that eventually they're going to be like, these teenagers, like, we're done with them. We don't need their free labor anymore. But he loved the computer so much that he spent every possible second during the day at the computer and at night. I'll let his quote speak for itself. He said, why am I wasting time here at home when I could be at the computer? It was about 10 o'clock at night. My parents were upstairs. My sister was in a room studying. So I quietly slid open my bedroom window, climbed out, crept under our deck and around the side of our house. And in a few minutes, I was at Children's Hospital, where I caught the number 30 bus to Roosevelt Way. I walked 4 blocks down to C-Cubed, 20 minutes door to door. That'd be the first of many nights I sneaked out that winter and for years after. And he has another quote where he's basically like, my parents totally knew what I was doing, but they didn't stop me. Thankful for that. This is the first of a huge string of stories where he grinds nonstop to get more opportunities to code or to solve programming problems. And he realizes that that constant, unconstrained focus and work is super key to becoming an expert in a discipline. This time of work all day, come home, sneak out the window, go work even more, sleep a few hours, then do it again was about 4 months long. And Gates said that it minted a work style for me that would last for decades, unconstrained by cost or time. I'd fall into a zone of total focus. As fast as I completed a section of program, I could ask the computer to run it, giving me an instant answer, whether it was right or wrong. Try something, see if it works. If it doesn't, try again with something different. This is that iterative work loop. He gets so engrossed in a problem that he has to just keep trying, testing, try again, test, try again, test, try again, test. So engrossed that he can't get himself to do anything else. There's a great story during this time. He and his buddies want to learn more. They're always hungry to learn. And at this time, there's very little instructional guides written about how to code because the field of computer programming is so new. But they're literally working at a computer company. So what they would do is go dumpster diving at night to find scraps of code that the other programmers at the company had thrown into the trash. And sometimes they would do it. They would get these pieces of paper out of the dumpster that had system code or source code on it. They'd find pieces of machine level code that the programmers would throw out and have to reverse engineer all of it and figure out what does all this mean. But they would learn from code thrown in the trash. He was so hungry to learn that he was willing to work for free. He was willing to dumpster dive to find extra code in the trash. And he saw that as the best life he could possibly be living. So around this time, as he's learning a ton about coding over there at C-Cubed over the summer, he realizes, okay, school is cool, but I'm done being the class clown because it makes me look average. I should start trying. So he starts trying at school, like really, really trying. And he realizes that he has this thing he calls hyperfocus. He becomes aware of it. And he could actually point it at different things. So instead of just, oh, I'm going to write 177 pages on Delaware, he realizes, I could actually point this at the right things at school. If I really concentrate on a subject at school, I can intake all this information and my mind sorts it onto a framework where it's structured and logical. It felt like discovering a superpower. Now, he says at the time, my powers weren't fully developed. I was 14 years old and didn't always have the discipline to put off reading yet another Tarzan book instead of trying to interpret the assigned history lesson. He starts realizing, wow, I'm different. I have this ability to just go into a zone. And if I can take that and point it at the right thing, it is like a superhuman ability. So he gets better at school. He's not getting all A's yet. He's still learning how to study, but he gets better at school. And around 9th, 10th grade, he and his buddies get their first real contract. Not just helping out with a random thing that company's letting them in the door to do, an actual contract. They're helping a local computer company make a payroll program for one of their clients. They just got access to the computers and didn't have to pay for it, which was huge. That was a total bargain to them. Learning for its own sake was more than enough motivation for these guys. The project was a big team effort between him and a bunch of his friends. He was one of the youngest guys on the project of the 3 or 4 of them working on it. The older guys actually kicked him off the project because they were like, we got this, we can figure it out. But then they realized this project is crazy. The company was asking them to automate their payroll processing, back when computer programming was a brand new thing. In order to do this, they had to learn brand new computer programming languages that none of them knew. They had to build a way to edit and debug those languages. And then they had to learn payroll and taxes and business and the laws around all of it. And then assimilate all that into an actual program. And so the junior and senior who are working on the program are like, all right, we need extra help on this thing. And when Bill gets back and he sees the state of everything, he says, look, if we're going to do this, I have to be in charge. I care more than everyone else. This is foreshadowing for what happens way down the line when he starts Microsoft. He does this exact same thing to his partner, by the way. His partner in Microsoft, Paul Allen, is one of the guys who kicked him off this project to begin with in middle school. He cares so much about his work and will devote so much effort to it that he is sure he's the most valuable one in the room and is willing to talk about it. Fanatical level of self-belief. He believed that his friends were letting the project slip by, and so if it had to work, he had to be in charge. And he did. He became in charge. He dictated who did what, how much time they all got at which computer station. They pumped the thing out, pitched it to the company, and they accepted it. And then his buddy Kent start thinking, well, how can we turn this into business? How could we charge royalties for it? What else could we do for this company? And that's this really cool example where Bill Gates starts to realize partnership's cool because I can do one thing and they can do another thing and we can both push each other. He's realizing all these things about the business of computer programming as a 13 and 14-year-old. It's crazy. So they do this big payroll processing project for free to get access to computer time. Then they move on to another big project, and this one they got paid for. At his school, they tried to use computers to automate every student's new course schedule. So you go to here at 8, to here at 9, to here at 10, and then Susie, you're going to do here at 8, here at 9, here at 10, and then Bob, you're going to do it this way. The problem was it was totally messed up. Everyone was double booked for stuff. Classes were overfilled. People couldn't get to all the classes they needed because of the way the classes were scheduled. Like you can't be in Latin 2 and Algebra 2 at the same time. It was a problem. And so guess who the school comes to ask to help solve the problem? Bill and Paul and some of their buddies. They start pulling out with the principal of the school, like all these old books about school timetables and the theories of class scheduling, and none of it was helping. Bill says this incredible line. He says, without my realizing it, I'd actually already been working on this problem for the past 6 months. Walking to class or laying in bed at night, my mind would form different permutations of the schedule, X number of classes, Y number of students, and so on, including the many conflicts and constraints that needed to be factored into the equation. Gates was so interested in problem solving that his mind was always tinkering around with a coding problem or a math problem. Even when he didn't mean to be doing it, he was so focused on this that you couldn't pull him away. He found what he was called to do. He didn't quite realize it yet. So he holds himself up in his room during a snowstorm and writes out a solution on pen and yellow paper and figures it out. Now they just have to implement it. So for about 3 weeks, he, Kent, and 4 teachers worked 20-hour days to pull together a program and a schedule for the next trimester. He said he remembers falling asleep at the punch card machine while he was typing. He realized it's 3 a.m. I don't know what day of the week it is. I haven't been home in a few days. This is crazy. The guy he loses himself in a problem once he's in it. But at the end of all of that, the program worked. The school had a way to schedule all their students. The quality was great. The principal was like, cool, you guys can work for us next year and we'll pay you more and all this stuff. And his buddy Kent is like, this is sick and we're going to expand the business like this and sell it to other schools like this. And around this time, his friend Kent tragically dies in a climbing accident. And this had a huge impact on Gates because this was his closest friend, the one who understood him and his intensity. These two guys shaped each other and rounded each other out. They pushed each other. Kent focused Bill's ambition, and Bill's ability gave Kent things to work with. Gates is so built for the grind that even is his coping mechanism for a heavy loss. He loses his best friend and goes right back to coding with Paul, his eventual co-founder of Microsoft. He says that throughout my life, I've tended to deal with loss by avoiding it, tamping it down to make it through the early stages of grief, and then quickly setting my focus on a distraction that fully engages my mind. And where is his mind fully engaged? It's when he's solving a really big, hard coding problem. So within a day, they're back in the computer room, coding 12 hours at a time, sleeping on little cots in between, and then getting up and coding. For a month, he says, Paul and I lived in that coding room. I fell asleep at the terminal more times than I can remember. Then I'd wake up with a start and immediately start coding again. He says the whole crazy project, in retrospect, was part of our grieving. It worked. Eventually, this entire thing is really instrumental for Gates because he completes another project for the school. He builds a friendship with Paul Allen, who, again, he founds Microsoft with this guy, who he met in middle school. But that's just another example of how Gates is built for being in the middle of a problem. He doesn't even realize how long has gone by or what he's working toward. He's just in the feedback loop of build it, test it, try again. Around this time is when Paul tells Gates about Moore's law, the principle that computing power will double every year at this rate of improvement. He sees the exponential growth coming. And so he and Paul drop a whole bunch of money to get one of the first microchips that uses this principle, and they start messing around with it. This is also when he starts applying to colleges. He gets a perfect score in the SAT math section. He wants to go to Harvard, but in his essay, he puts that he wants to study business and law, not coding, because he thinks those are going to make him more money or be more interesting. He eventually changes his mind. But when he gets interested in college, he still hasn't quite internalized that, man, coding is my thing. I'm built for computer science. Senior year of high school, he gets referred to a programming job during school at a power administration that distributes electricity across Washington, Oregon, and California. He talks his principal into letting him skip part of his senior year to work this job. And the principal's like, sure, and do it for credit. Go. Miss 2 months of school and work this job. He's a pretty big-headed high schooler at this point, and that job teaches him a ton about operating at a really high level, both from how demanding the job itself was because it pushed him to work harder than he ever had before, just to stand out. There were high-caliber programmers there who would mark up his code and tell him, change this, switch this around. He had never been given feedback like this. It made him redefine what good meant. He already knew how to grind. He said that I prided myself on writing code fast and long stretches of intense work. And I can only imagine what the seasoned programmers around there thought of the kid working like a maniac late into every night, burning out code, eating Tang powdered drink mix straight from the jar until his tongue turned orange. Bill Gates just ate stuff and did stuff. Work. None of this morning routine garbage, none of this organic food nonsense. He just did stuff and did a lot of it. In this time, he actually has a stretch where he just sits in this underground tunnel for 100 days straight writing code, didn't shower, barely ate for 4 days. He talks about how they're just working on coding and then eating out and living on Tang drink powder and pizza. And to most people, that sounds kind of insane, kind of hellish. But Gates said this felt like the most free and easy time I'd ever had in my life. This incredible work schedule, this unrelenting devotion to problem solving, that's his natural habitat. That's where he's comfortable. That's what's easy for him. This is something I want to take a second and highlight because most people have some end result they want to get to. They want to have a legacy. They want to have a business they built. They want to make a certain amount of money. They want to be recognized by this many people. But what they don't realize is that the greatest people in the world at any given discipline enjoy the result, but fall in love with the process. And most average people fall in love with the result and work on the process. Gates was in love with grinding through problems and learning. It was baked into him as an 8-year-old. As a senior in high school, it was still there. You can't teach or fake that. And you will never, ever be able to outcompete it if you are not built that way. A founder like this is built different. He is to the core a workhorse. Not because he's in the middle of it going, I gotta make $1 million, or I gotta make $100 million. There are multiple times in the book where Gates says, I didn't really feel the satisfaction or realize what I just did until I was all the way at the end of the hike, all the way at the end of the coding project. And then I'd turn around and be like, that was good. He found that thing that just drew him in, kept drawing him in. He could keep working on as long as he wanted to. And it always kept giving back to him. He found his zone of genius. All right, so back to Harvard. He's unsure if he wants to go to Harvard or not. His friend Paul is like, dude, just drop out and start businesses with me. And he's like, nah, I don't think so. His computer programming colleagues are like, dude, skip to grad school. You already could do grad school coding work. That tempts him. His parents don't really like either idea. So he just decides to hop into Harvard as an undergrad student to learn as much as possible. They have a computer lab there. He finds the guy who runs the lab and is like, I'm super smart and I'm going to do all these things. And the guy's like, sure, here's a key. And his ego's a little damaged, but he gets access to the computer. I want to highlight his classes though, because the way he approached classes at school is just incredible. As he's looking through the catalog as a freshman, he sees in the math section that the highest level class that freshmen could take in math is called Math 55. And you have to pass this big entrance exam just to get in. And there's a warning that says, enter with caution. Only do this if you are the best and ready to work at this super high level of math. And Gates sees this and remember how as a kid, he was like, I want to be a scientist. I want to understand what other people can't. He goes, oh, this is that. This is the knowledge that most people can't do. He takes the entrance exam, gets into this legendary math class. And about 70% of the class drops within a month. And that's of Harvard students who passed an entrance exam to get into this extremely difficult math class. This class teaches him just the raw insanity of what it takes to become a world-class mathematician. This guy had a perfect SAT math score. He was wired for math, but he realized, well, all my classmates do too. And several of these guys are more built for high-level math than me. I will not be able to outmath these other classmates around me. And the funny thing is the classmates around him who he felt outclassed by all felt outclassed by the professor of this math class. So Gates abandons full-on mathematics eventually to go be a computer scientist. His classmates, who he thought these guys are going to be excellent at math, saw their professor and were like, we're never going to be him. They both switched disciplines and also became very successful in their physics and history disciplines. But Gates realizes that I'm very good at math. I don't have the gift of insight that sets apart the best mathematicians. I don't have the ability to make fundamental discoveries. This is so cool to me because he realizes I'm good at this thing, but I don't have that X factor. He was playing to win. He wanted to pick a discipline that he was so darn good at that he would be the best in the business at it. And this guy with an 800 SAT math score, around the smartest math people in the world, and he's hanging with them, goes, I'm good at this, but I will never be great. So I'm not going to pursue it. Crazy. Playing to win. Around the rest of college, though, the dude was having so much fun. He says, those first months of college, I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was dazzled by the seemingly limitless access to experts and intellectual stimulation. He loved his nonstop college life. His schedule was nuts. I'll just read the quote. He said, I threw myself into a daily rhythm that worked for me even if it seemed extreme to my friends. Between studying and programming, I could be awake for 36 hours at a stretch. Whenever exhaustion took over, I'd head back to my dorm, crash for 12 or more hours, often fully clothed, sometimes with my shoes still on, always with my yellow electric blanket over my head to block the daylight. When I woke up, I'd gobble something quick, maybe stop by the suite to see Andy and Jim, then head to class, the library, or back to the computer lab. I repeated some variation of that routine for months. Dude is a grinder. He wakes up and he works and works until he actually can't work anymore, crashes, wakes up, shakes his head, gets some food, says hi to the boys, and then goes back and keeps working. Again. You can't take the grind out of someone like this. After his first semester, he's working super hard. He realizes I'm never going to be the greatest mathematician ever. So he starts taking some computer science classes. And he starts to get job offers from some really big computer companies. One firm helicopters him out and offers him a job. He gets offers from big companies doing important computer science stuff. He declines all of them. He describes it by saying it had been a test of sorts. Could I get offers? I didn't need the actual job. The offers gave me a story to tell my friends. Proof of my value even without the high-class education we were all striving for. Insane confidence in himself. I'm going to apply for these jobs. I'm going to entertain these interviews at the biggest companies in the world because I can, to prove I'm good. Fanatical, insane level of self-belief. As he goes into his next semester, he's taking some computer science classes. He changes his major to applied math, though, because applied math lets him take whatever he wants, basically. He can learn whatever he thinks is interesting. He would use the applied math major to take linguistics, criminal justice, economics, British history classes. He said it was the perfect major for an information omnivore. Harvard had a 3-week reading period where for 20 days there was no class so that you could prep for finals. Gates decides, I am good enough at hyper-focusing and cramming that I can learn my entire semester of class just in those 3 weeks. So I'm going to skip the lectures of every class I sign up for and audit another full-time load of classes the entire semester so that I can be exposed to as much learning as I possibly can. At Harvard, there's an incredible story where he audits a philosophy class the whole semester and he sits in there with all the philosophy guys talking about all this abstract stuff, and then he disappears for the 3 weeks before finals to study up for all his math finals. And he goes and takes this math final in a big lecture hall that's split down the middle. And one half is his math final, and on the other half is the philosophy final of the class he audited. He walks in, sits down on the math side, and all the philosophy guys are like, what are you doing? You're not in that class, you're in our class. You're like, dude, you're taking the wrong exam. No, this is my exam. I was just hanging out with you guys because it was fun. He was such a learning machine. He loved it to the extent that he would literally do 2 full-time school periods at once. Around this time, sophomore year of college, a consequential little machine called the Altair comes out. This is the first personal computer. It's the first device that he sees that's taking advantage of Moore's law that he saw coming previously. He says, for the last 3 years, Paul and I had been talking about how new computers that exploited the exponential improvement of chips could change everything. I looked up at Paul. It's happening without us, he said. He has this sense that this is a key moment. We have to seize it. He did this in middle school with a programming project where he said, guys, you don't care enough. We have to do this. Look at the opportunity we have to learn. I'm taking over. He starts getting this sense with Paul about this new device, the Altair. And they realize, oh, wait, this thing needs software. It probably doesn't even have a language ready to run on it. So they both throw themselves into another ridiculous grind season. They build an emulator on their school's computer so that it can pretend to be the machine they're coding for. And they call up the company and they're like, hey guys, we have code ready for you, which they didn't. They were just telling him, we basically are there. They were lying about it so that they could say we have an MVP. And the Altair guys called them back and are like, yeah, well, several others said the same thing. Whoever actually gives it to us first gets the business. And then they also find out that the Altair computer that they saw advertisements for was also a month out from being ready. All these these founders founding the personal computer revolution are all just faking their way. We are ready. Well, we don't actually have the language yet, but we'll get it done soon. So to get that project done, they go into another grind season where he would sleep during the day, skip all his classes, and then all night they would code. He would wear his winter jacket to the lab so that he could code and sleep at the terminal and not get too cold. I had spent a huge chunk of my life in that weird, almost magical feedback loop in which time seems to stop. I'd sit down at the terminal after dinner and then look up surprised to find it was 2 a.m. It's that same thing, man. The grind and the feedback loop. It's entrancing. So eventually they pitch the language to the Altair guys. It works. His buddy Paul gets a job at the Altair company and he stays in school. They're both working on writing code for this company and making some money. This is less about Microsoft and more about Bill Gates. Today, personal computer market starts to blow up a little bit. A whole bunch of companies start to buy microchips and assemble small computers, and he and Paul are desperately trying to keep sending new languages and new code out to all these different companies and drum up more business. He has this great line about the early stages of growing Microsoft. He says, anytime I wasn't sleeping, coding, or writing a letter trying to drum up business, my mind was locked on the next step. People to hire, deals to cut, new customers. When I got going, everything on my mind just spilled out to anyone who would listen. My mind needed to make order of everything I heard, every new piece of information that I was soaking up. I'd talk and then notice that everyone else was done eating. I'd leave a restaurant, having not touched my food. He was working on an unbelievable degree of focus. There's a phenomenal letter that he writes to an early coworker at Microsoft. And he writes him a letter and says, I estimated it would take a person 2.5 months of work in order to get this project done. But I told him that time is measured in Gates months. A self-referential attempt to make it clear that I meant hard work, full-time, with no distractions. Bill Gates was so dedicated to undistracted work that he had to clarify to people, I mean like Gates months, not like normal months. Great story about him starting Microsoft as a business, starting to write a business plan for Microsoft. He basically has 3 principles for the business plan for Microsoft. Spend almost nothing. Get paid $9 an hour, no more, no less. Make money. Grow in size and reputation. Focus on this for 2 years. Do good stuff. Make money and keep costs low. That was the business plan for one of the most successful companies of all time. Focus for a couple years, do good stuff, make money, control costs. And back to work. The ultimate grinder. Founders get it, man. These legendary founders, they take a problem and throw themselves at it and figure out enough business stuff to make sure it's good, keep the costs low, keep working on it, make money, and keep grinding away at the biggest bottleneck around. Gates's 100 million% focus was tough for the people around him because he never tolerated anything less than that level. One of the early guys on his team, the one he wrote the Gates Months letter to, actually dropped because he wanted to be a more well-rounded person. He's still at Harvard. He's not full-time in Microsoft yet. And he starts to realize, oh boy, we're spending more money. I can't see every deal. We're underbidding on stuff. I'm losing control of this company. Often when I'd check in with Paul or Rick, I'd hear about some new issue that I thought wasn't being handled. The more I learned about the GE deal, the more I came to believe we had underbid them for the work we promised. Rick wasn't tracking the money for employee business trips, and we were way over budget on travel. We were owed $10,000 from this other job, but neither Paul or Rick knew when it was expected. So he starts realizing things are a little sloppy. These guys who I'm working with are not as devoted as I am. They're not controlling costs hard enough. So what was the solution? It was to crack down with an iron hammer. He writes him a letter. Spending $14,000 since I've left and not thinking about cash flow or taking care of the memory royalty is the way to send us down to. Okay, the guy was ruthless about cash flow and zero costs. And then he's writing this letter. And at the end of the letter, after blasting them for not working on costs enough and letting things get sloppy, he goes, for all that talk about hard work and long hours, it's clear that you guys haven't talked about Microsoft together or even thought about it individually, at least not near enough. The commitment just isn't being met. Your friend, Bill, reams out his business partners saying, you guys are not working hard enough. You're not thinking enough. Your best is not enough yet. Make your best better. Of the three of us, I had always been the taskmaster, the one who incessantly worried about losing our lead and fearing that if we weren't careful, we'd be sunk. The greatest founders, any great business team has this guy on the team. Or the team is only this guy, the obsessively detailed, ruthlessly focused, always wondering what the problem is going to be guy who never stops working and expects nothing but that level from everyone else around him. Another pivotal moment in the story comes on another long walk he takes. Remember how he likes rocking and movement when he's alone with his head? That's where breakthroughs happen. As he's long distance from Harvard, shortly after that letter, he starts to realize that everything's happening all at once. Companies are making computers. The company that made the Altair their biggest source of revenue is hating on them and fighting over the licensing of their code. He says it felt like the industry was starting to take off, and there was no way we were going to get left behind, I told myself. He has this sense for the crux moment, like when he heard about Moore's Law, like when he heard about the Altair and the first Intel chip, like when he and the buddies were all making that coding job, and he commandeered the project to make sure it would actually get done on time. He had this ability to realize this is a pivotal moment, crank it into overdrive and throw it all at this one thing. And then you pair that with his total belief in himself. He and Paul are the only two left at Microsoft at this point as partners because Rick left. So it's Bill Gates and Paul Allen. And he and Paul are aligned on, we want to create this PC software that's going to take over the industry. But he straight up says in this book, it was clear to me by the end of 1976 that the ambition to be the first to get there, to be the fastest, to build the best bridge to the other side, speaking about the computer industry, it was stronger in me than it was in him. He had fanatical belief in himself. And why? Here's why. Like one of those watertight hatches on a submarine, I could shut out the rest of the world, driven by the sense of responsibility I felt for Microsoft. I had closed the hatch door and locked the wheel. No girlfriend, no hobbies, my social life centered on Paul, Rick, and the people we worked with. It was the one way I knew to stay ahead. And I expected similar dedication from the others. We had this huge opportunity in front of us. Why wouldn't you work 80 hours a week in pursuit of it? Yeah, it was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. That's incredible. And he takes this, and on another long walk, he realizes this industry is going places. We got to get after it. He takes another walk and realizes, okay, if I'm going to go full-time at Microsoft, which I'm not yet, I'm still a full-time student, I need a bigger share of the company because I'm more focused and more skilled and harder working than they are. And so he goes to his partner and says, I want 64, you get 36 of the company. And that 4% bonus is how he later gets Steve Ballmer to quit business school and join them on Microsoft. And he becomes Gates' real 24-hour nonstop work partner. Paul Allen was never quite that. So that's about the time when Gates decides, I'm going full-time in Microsoft. And that's where the story of source code ends. But the cool thing about this book was just how unfiltered the look at Bill Gates was. He said what I thought at the end of the book. He said that if I were growing up today, I'd probably be diagnosed on the autism spectrum. But in the time of my childhood, the fact that some people's brains process information differently from others wasn't widely understood. This guy's odd. He's an extreme person who was presented with extreme opportunity with these computers, and a family who loved and supported him and nurtured him in a certain direction. And he recognizes that too. What I do know is that my parents afforded me the precise blend of support and pressure I needed. They gave me room to grow emotionally and created opportunities for me to develop my social skills. What's so fascinating about this book to me is that you can see that from day zero, Gates was built to be a grinder. He was built to sink into a project and stay there as long as he possibly could. Nothing pleased him more than learning and solving problems. He says it's a marvel of adulthood to realize that when you strip away all the years and all the learning, much of who you are was there from the start. In many ways, I'm still that 8-year-old sitting at grandma's dining room table as she deals the cards. I feel the same sense of anticipation, a kid, alert, and wanting to make sense of it all.